Working Drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everyone, this is Zach Albetta, and this is the podcast Working Drummer. Today I talk with drummer and band leader Willie McNeil. He's been in LA for over 3 decades, playing in almost any type of band you can imagine over that time, and he is the leader of no less than 8 bands right now, ranging from salsa to soul. In recent years, his signature project, Big Willie Burlesque, has become the centerpiece of the burlesque scene in LA. He talks about LA now versus when he moved there in the early 80s, how to put on a crowd-pleasing show, and lots more. Before we get to that, I want to let you know that this episode of Working Drummer is sponsored by OnlineDrummer.com. OnlineDrummer.com provides drummers of all ages and skill levels with the best educational resources, including videos, sheet music, ebooks, articles, Skype lessons, and more. OnlineDrummer.com puts all these tools at your fingertips to help you improve your playing. Working Drummer Podcast listeners can get a free download of the sheet music of your choice by visiting OnlineDrummer.com and entering the promo code WORKINGDRUMMER, no dots, no spaces. Again, go to OnlineDrummer.com and enter the promo code WORKINGDRUMMER for 1 free download of the sheet music of your choice. Get practice tips, build your chops, work out new styles, or learn your favorite song today at OnlineDrummer.com. So let's get to my talk with Willie McNeil. He has a huge range of experience, and he's a colorful character. He's got some opinions, and he's not shy with them. So buckle up, and hope you enjoy it. So let's just begin at the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where did you come from?
I'm from Kansas, from Topeka, Kansas.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I spent 7 years in Kansas City.
I'm sorry.
Kansas City is a great town.
Well, it's funny because people always go, oh, it's a great music town. I'm like, yeah, in the 30s. So they don't get it. Like now, I don't think it's such a great music town.
I think there's a really good scene there. It's not the old school jazz scene that it used to be. There's a lot of really creative, original projects and people that happen there. But how long did you spend in Topeka?
Yeah, well, I went to junior high and high school there. Okay. And then I moved to LA when I was 19.
And did you come out here for college, or did
No, I was in a punk band. I was in a punk band in the Midwest in 79, 80, and 81 called Abuse. And it was one of the sort of only punk bands to come out of Topeka and one out of the area. And you got to remember, times were very different back then. It was before MTV, and to be different and to do something different was difficult because there wasn't, it was like everything was all like, leftover hippie, long hair, Foreigner, Journey, Styx, and if you, even like I said, into the late 70s, and we were doing punk rock and had short hair and stuff, and it was people really, it wasn't like now. Now I think people are a lot more open to different things. People are a lot more closed-minded to things, so it was difficult. But we were a good band, and we came out here because we had another guy from Topeka. Named Carlton Page. Get smart. His name is Alan Oschlager. He used to play in Piper, actually, back in the 70s. But he had a management deal, and he had a publishing deal and management here in LA, and he'd written some songs for some pop artists out here, and so he had us come out to be his band. Wow. So that's why we moved out. And we'd done pretty much everything we could do back in the Midwest because there wasn't, we opened up for, bands like the Go-Go's and 999 and, kind of were the darlings of the underground punk scene. And so then we moved out here to make it big.
And did you?
Oh, no. All bands that moved to L.A. split up within half a year.
Right.
And most couples.
So what, you came out here to be part of a band that quickly disbanded? Yeah. And then what?
Oh, and then I started my own first band that I was a leader of called the Hot Spots with a good friend of mine, Kevin Williams, who's also, I met in Topeka. He's from LA, but he moved there. And from there, the big thing, I used to work at this club called the On Club with that, and it was a real happening place for ska and reggae back in the early 80s.
And that's what kind of a band the Hot Spots was?
It was a ska band. Yeah. And And then I got a job in like about 83, I think it was, at this place called Flip on Melrose, and it was a used clothing store, and it kind of made Melrose what Melrose is.
Right.
Not that it's that much these days, but it used to, And it was great because then I really met like everybody in the music. So they hired so many musicians. It was a big used clothing store. It had 2 huge stores, and they hired loads and loads of people. And of course, they hired lots of gays and lots of English people and lots of cool looking musicians.
Yeah.
And so I met like everybody who was kind of on the scene, and it really kind of launched my career.
Right.
And it particularly launched my career because I met this guy Jason Mayall, who was John Mayall's son.
Right.
And he's really still, even to this day, been a big factor in my angel in my career. He's hooked me up with some of the biggest gigs I've ever had.
Right. So as soon as you got out here, you started your own band.
Yeah.
And you were the leader of that band. Mm-hmm. And if you go to Willie's website,
co-leader, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you go to Willie's website, you'll find like 8 different bands that he plays with. It's pretty amazing, actually. But I want to ask you about how you became of the mindset to be the leader of a band and the leader of many bands instead of a lot of cats come to LA or to New York to be a sideman. But what made you want to be a leader?
I don't know. I think it was just in my mentality. Like when I was in school, I mean, I was a product of like the school band system. That's where I learned to read music, and I took piano lessons and theory, and of course drum. Played in all the different bands, and I was always the section leader. So I guess I've kind of always been someone who's maybe good at leading. You're good at being in charge.
Yeah. And
I think I have a good way of working with people.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. It just came out, and like I said, this friend of mine, Kevin, and I, we started working at this club. He was like doing the sound, and I was just like hanging out there, picking up on chicks, and I'd make a few extra dollars, like collecting bottles at the end of the night. I was like 20 years old or something.
Right.
And then we were like, we got to put a band together, so we just put it together, and we wrote a bunch of original music together.
Yeah.
So that just kind of happened organically.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a leader. And then I guess later on I was a sideman, and I played rock and roll up until like 89. And then in 89 I again did another co-leader thing with Joe Altruda and Jump with Joey, and also the Soul Sonics around the same time with my partner Jazz Collin. And then it really wasn't until I got the gig as the musical director at the 40 Deuce in like 2004 that I really kind of struck out just on my own, being a leader on my own. So it's been a long process.
Yeah. So you started in a punk band, and then after that ska, reggae. I knew you have a reputation around town as being heavy into the swing, heavy into burlesque, heavy into the whole vintage thing. But I only recently learned how involved you've been in all these other kinds of music. Yeah,
it's funny because when I've been in town like 34 years, and you run into people you've known on the scenes from back 30 years ago or something, or people come up to me and go like, well, I know you, you look familiar, and it's like, well, yeah, what decade or
right.
what band, Yeah, I used to just to make it quick, I used to, let's see, in my first major touring act, well, I guess I should preface this. Another thing I've always done is I've always played in more than one band. I've always done like a lot of different bands at once. And that's what makes it easy to, I think now when I have a lot of bands I lead, switch gears. Because I've always done more than one band. Because I was in this band Tupelo Chain Sex, which was this crazy psychobilly band, like from like.
This interview is just going to be a study in band names. I can tell.
And like 83, I think I started playing like in Tupelo Chain Sex, and that band I did 4 records with them, and it was a pretty cool band. That band was really hip. That really influenced Fishbone a lot, and the Chili Peppers, particularly Fishbone, because we crossed a whole bunch of different styles of music. We do like, like a rockabilly tune with the reggae one-drop drum beat underneath it, or like weird stuff. We mixed like blues and jazz and punk rock and all kinds of stuff together. And nobody was really doing that. You kind of at the time did one genre, and that's, I think, Fishbone. We used to play with them a lot, and they kind of picked that up. Like, oh, that's why if you see Fishbone, they do a bunch of different styles. They don't just do one thing. And I think we were influential in that in that band on them. But so that was Tupelo Chain Sex, and then at the same time, I got my first international touring act with Jason Mayall's father, John Mayall and the Blues Breaker, and that was when I was 21. That's the first time I went to Europe and started doing international touring. So that was pretty hip. I moved when I was 19. By 21, I was already touring internationally.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really my thing because everybody was like old enough to be my dad in the band, and it was like the blues. And at the time, even though it was like 85, there was still loads of leftover hippies, particularly in Europe and stuff, or in Jersey or wherever. And
yeah.
Like, you know, you'd go and there'd be all these like old hippie dudes. I'm like, it's not my scene. I was like a punk rocker, so
right.
You know. But it was great experience and great. You know, like I said, my first international tour.
Right. Did you have a specific strategy when you got here?
No, it was just kind of who you met on the clubs and stuff.
Right.
Like I said, it was really lucky that I got this gig at Flip, the clothing store in Melrose, because that was a great place to network.
Right.
Because everybody like from people from Texas and the Horseheads and, you know, Jimmy and the Mustangs and like whatever, like all these bands, they all worked.
And you'd never think that. Like you talk about, you know, musicians talk about getting a job tending bar at a place they want to play or whatever, but you got a job at a clothing store. Where everybody just hung out there.
Yeah, that's where everybody went to get their clothes. It was like I said, it was like the place that really made Melrose what it was.
Right. So all these different styles that you play, have you been interested in many different things from an early age, or have you just gradually added?
Even like from like when I started, you know, I guess, you know, I'm kind of from a musical family, and both my parents play instruments, and my oldest brother and my sister also play instruments, and so of course, you know, you do the stuff you do in high school band and all, but you know, like my brothers and stuff were into rock and roll and whatever, and then when I started getting into punk rock and stuff, one of the first things that happened was, back in the day when you go to the stores that would carry the punk rock records and stuff, they also have a reggae section. And so of course I really got into the reggae back then. I got into I was already into Bob Marley and stuff, like, you know, and then I started really getting more into like the two-tone specials sort of scene, and then also more into heavy dub and into like the real roots reggae stuff, you know, not just the pop, Jimmy Cliff, Bob Marley kind of stuff.
Right.
And so, so already then I was already splitting into two. And then when I moved here, it was like, then I really started getting into African music. I saw Fela Kuti at the Olympic Auditorium, at really one of the best shows I've ever seen. And I was opened up for King Sunny Ade at the Greek Theater, and that, you know, so you know, started getting more around, and then here, you know, KCRW always had good reggae and African shows and stuff like that back in the day.
Did you ever take formal study with anyone to learn any of these styles? Did you?
Yeah, not till later, not till like '89. Then I started to study Afro-Cuban music.
With who?
Oh boy, a lot of different people. I'd say Ramon Banda is, you know, a guy. I've gone with Tiki Pasillas. Who else? You know, a lot of different people. Robertito Melendez, different people here in town. The most studying I did, or the best study, is when I went to Cuba. I've been to Cuba 3 times, and I studied there with Enrique Pla, who's the drummer for Irequere, and they're a seminal band. Chucho Valdez, the band leader, and he plays drum set, you know, and he did back in the 70s, you know, and so he was sort of a precursor to the modern timba sound that always uses drum set in Cuban music. But so he played drum set, and I studied drum set with him, and then I studied timbal with Emilio Del Monte from the group Cubanissimo. Yeah.
What do you think are some common misconceptions or mistakes when it comes to Afro-Cuban music and American drummers?
Let me see, the mistake. Well, the biggest mistake is always with the sound man, because they always want to mic the kick and the snare, and it's not about that. It's about the bell. It's about the campana. That's the bass drum in Cuban music. But for American drummers, I'd say the biggest mistake is like particularly drummers that went to like Berkeley, or drummers that went to like music schools, North Texas State or whatever. They'll get a thing of like, they'll be like, if you're on a casual or something, and the band leader will say, "Oh, this is a Latin feel," and most jazz players immediately go to like a samba feel, and it's like that's a Brazilian rhythm,
right?
And that's what you play to a samba. That's not what you play over a Cuban tune, over like a mambo or a salsa or whatever,
right?
Yeah.
The difference between Brazilian and Afro-Cuban is
completely different.
And a lot of people don't even know that there's a difference. And until I was, 22 or 23, I was one of those people.
Yeah.
It's all kind of under the big Latin tent.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. So, that would be the biggest mistake because, I see that, and bass players too, like for bass players to get the concept of tumbao, it's a pretty heavy concept and it really takes a long time to really grasp.
Right.
And you're not going to get it overnight, the intricacies of it. Like you might be able to play the rhythm early on, but that doesn't, mean you got it necessarily.
Yeah. So you came to LA in 1981 at age 19.
Yeah.
So take a drummer who's coming to LA today at age 19 or early 20s or whatever.
Right.
How do you think your experience was better or worse or harder or easier? What do you think the difference is between your experience and somebody coming to LA today?
It's completely different. It was way easier for me.
Was it?
Oh yeah, because you got to remember, this was before DJ culture, and so every club had like 3 bands a night. The whole scene evolved around live music. So every club, particularly in Hollywood, there was a Cafe de Grand and the Club Lingerie and whatever. Every club had 3 bands a night, at least. Some would have 5, and everyone did like a 45-minute like set. And so everyone came to see the band. The whole scene was based around the bands. Like you never even saw a DJ. Like Club Lingerie was like the only place that had a DJ. It was kind of novel, and they kind of spin in between the bands, So that was the main difference. So it was really, and back then also, it was very inexpensive here, particularly in Hollywood, because Hollywood was really pretty beat in the early 80s. So it was kind of like, neighborhood that wasn't, people didn't want to move here. So you could get like a really nice apartment, like some of these big old lovely apartments, wood floors from the 30s or whatever, and for really cheap, go get some big old, like the English. I had a lot of English friends just because I met all these English people at Flip. And they loved it. The English boys come here, they get laid all the time. The English accent went a long way. And they come and they get some big old cars, some like Pontiac convertible, like for $500. And they loved it. They were living the dream.
Yeah.
And so it was like that way somewhat for musicians. So you could come. There were people like bass players I knew, or even some drummers that could make a living just playing in 3 or 4 different bands and like gigging, like, because the thing is, like, pay hasn't really changed. They were still $100 gigs back then.
So given the higher degree of competition in LA and there's fewer opportunities than there were to play, and the cost of living is higher, do you still recommend young drummers come to LA and see what they can do?
Yeah, either LA or a major city. You have to go to LA, New York, London, Tokyo. You have to be at a major center if you really want to like do it, in my opinion.
So, and how do you recommend they survive? Because you said in your day it was pretty easy to survive. It was pretty easy to do your thing.
Right. I don't know. Everybody has their own way of doing it. Everyone's got to find their own path. These days, a lot of people teach. I would recommend doing something something to deal with the internet, something that kind of, because I think these days part of being successful is having a big internet presence and knowing, like, for instance, there used to be a whole system put in place of the way you can make money with like getting a deal and having the distributors and touring and all this stuff, and that model's kind of gone.
Right.
And the people who seem to do well, the people who know how to like work the internet in their favor and know how to make money off the internet. So I would recommend getting some sort of IT job to have that kind of skill. So when you need to do your own social networking sort of thing. Right.
How did you adapt to that?
What, the computer stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, it was hard.
But no, you have a good online presence. You have a good social media presence. You have a beautiful website.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you have? Do you have a strategy as far as your online presence?
Not really. I guess my wife. You can blame my wife, or you can thank my wife.
Yeah,
I should say. She pestered me for years to get the website together, so I finally did it. As far as the online presence, I would say the burlesque thing kind of really helps. because they repost a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it also helps that I have I've been doing burlesque now for 13 years, so I have tons and tons of photos with beautiful women, naked, half naked, clad women, and so that always makes for good images. Like I see some, people like in bands or whatever, and I see the images they put up, and it's all like blurry and out of focus and dark and like stupid like guys standing around. It's like that's not really like what that's not going to make a good impression.
Right. Whereas
I just kind of have a picture of me and like one of the ladies. It's like it's a strong image.
Yeah, and it's good photography too.
Yeah, because there's good photographers. I mean, these days.
Yeah.
I worked with this bass player, Joe Altruda, for 22 years. And he got a call from Ivan Kane, the owner of the 40 Deuce. And so he was like, hey, I got this burlesque gig together. It was right next door to his studio. He had a studio, because the club's at Melrose and Gower in Hollywood, right across from Paramount. And he had a recording studio just literally 2 doors down. So we could go hang out in the recording studio on our breaks. And so got the gig, and it was 4 nights a week, Wednesday through Saturday.
Wow.
And it was funny because we were hanging out, and originally we were going to kind of do, this keeps happening on residencies for me, where it's like, well, we're just going to kind of keep a bunch of people in the loop, have sort of 2 or 3 people for every chair, and kind of spread the wealth around. But then the owner's like, no, I want this guy, and I want this, it gets to be like, I want the A team and the B team. And then, so you get your first, second, third call kind of guy. But we got the gig, and we were kind of sitting around one time laughing, because I think it started in May or something, and we were because it wasn't really happening, wasn't busy when we first started doing it. We were sort of sitting around, this is not going to last till Thanksgiving, kind of thing. And then it just blew up massively and became, it really kind of put burlesque on the map in Los Angeles in a commercial sense. Right. There was already a lot of burlesque happening for years before, particularly with the Velvet Hammer and other things, but it was still very underground and kind of what I would call the tattooed fat slags from Silver Lake version of burlesque. And whereas these were professional dancers, and the main difference was the way he was presented it, and the fact that the DJ would play the latest dance music, hip hop and what have you, interspersed with sort of a classic burlesque show, which we didn't really care for. We'd always go outside on the break because we couldn't stand the music they played in between. But that's what made it accessible. Right, brought it into the mainstream. Exactly. Yeah. So you were just in a house band. Yeah, I was just in a house band for the dancers. And then it became sort of clear early on that I had a good rapport with the dancers, and then I sort of learned from hanging with them and stuff how to write arrangements for them. And talk about that. What is your musical approach for a burlesque show? Well, the musical approach is I really like to do a 2-song medley, going from a slow song into a fast song. Obviously, the medley needs to segue seamlessly from the slow into the fast. During the slow tune, you do the traditional bump and grind kind of beat on the floor tom. And the thing that's so great about that beat is you can catch any movement the dancer does. Yeah. Like if you're doing a rock tune or a jazz swing tune or something, you're kind of busy. But when you're doing the floor tom beat, you can really catch any kick or throw. When they throw any closer, you can catch it, whether it's on the off beat or on beat or wherever it is, Yeah. And also, I think it's very important during the slow part of the tune that the thing that most people don't do is they don't follow the dancer. So you need to follow the dancer. When they start shaking, you got to play the bells or toms to do a shake. When they're doing a split and they go down into a split and they hit the ground, you need to do a full stop, like a dead stop, and the whole band needs to do it. Then it has a real dramatic effect. Yeah. They kick, boom, you hit the cymbal, Right. Whatever. And also, not too much cymbal. I always have just used one ride and hi-hat. A lot of people, they get real cymbal heavy, and to me, that's not appropriate in a burlesque, but that's my opinion. Yeah. But I see that a lot. Why? What about the cymbals? It's just not too traditional sounding. It gets too, I don't know. Yeah. So then when you get to the fast number, usually I try to have contour to it. Either have sections that go double time and go back, or go into a 6/8 section, or something to give the song contour, so it's not just a slow tempo into a fast tempo. Because dancers really like they like rhythmic punches and stuff to grab to hit to, but they also like time changes and time signature changes and things that, in other words, a song that goes someplace.
Yeah.
Not just a stagnant one beat, one rhythm, which is kind of, opposite of like a jazz song, because usually you play, it's just one rhythm, one tempo the whole way through.
Right.
You're not going to do decelerandos and accelerandos and, things like that. But typically I would I'd write in a special arrangement like 3/4 of the way through the fast tune to the point where they take off their outer bra to the pasties or under bra, whatever they're going down to. And then there should be a big climactic hit for that when they take it off, and then it should just kind of be like, okay, I'm out of here, because once you take off and you don't have much else to take off, then you kind of need to end the tune.
Right. What about the material for those songs? Because like you said, a lot of it is jazz based. Right. But if you go see if I see one of your shows at No Vacancy or the Edison or wherever, you're drawing from a lot of different eras, a lot of different genres.
I usually always chat with the dancer, because this is another secret I think to my success, is that some people would just be like, oh, I play music and you dance, and like kind of be a bitch about it, and like, here's the tune, dance to it,
right?
Which I didn't really think was the right attitude to have. So I always just chat with the dancer. What do you like? What kind of music you like? Oh, you like rock and roll? What do you like? The Stones or Zeppelin or what modern stuff? What are you into? Right. Luckily, I worked with this dancer Carolina Sarisola, and we both loved Cuban music.
Cool.
And so I wrote a lot of Cuban arrangements for her, or Latin arrangements, And so that was the secret there, is you ask the dancer what they're into, and then you can kind of like, go with it. And like I had one dancer who was from French Polynesia, from Tahiti. So I wrote this big, Polynesian drum break into one of the tunes.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, with the Latin dancers, I can write a Latin arrangement. If they're more into the rock and roll, like I had this whole Led Zeppelin medley that was like really popular. And, and it was like, and you wouldn't think you could pull off a Led Zeppelin medley without vocals, without a guitar, even without a chordal instrument. But we did.
Yeah.
Because, it's so recognizable. That's the other thing, too, recognizable material. It's got to be, I think, a big mistake that a lot of musicians make, no matter what instrument they play, is they don't get that they're not playing for musicians. They're like, it's like, they're worried about, somebody blew these changes or this or that. And it's like, nobody knows.
Right.
Oh, you're singing flat or something. Nobody knows. Yeah, it's like, it's more about they want to be entertained. And so I think a lot of musicians would do better if they think more along the route of being an entertainer as opposed to being like a jazz pro.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the other groups that you lead that are active right now and what they do.
Active at the moment, I've been working at the Edison like 7.5 years with Big Willie Burlesque, and at the La Descarga, it's a club. I work. I've been there 5.5 years with the little Cuban quartet. I call it Sono Lux Jr. Because Sono Lux is my kind of modern contemporary timba Cuban band, but I don't work with them that much these days. I had a residency with them every Tuesday for 6.5 years at the King, but I stopped doing it because it's really hard doing it like a 10, 11 piece band.
Yeah.
For the door.
Right.
And I've been working a lot with this band Mambo Loco with the singer Edith Cepeda, and we do like 40s, like 30s and 40s mambo, 50s stuff.
Yeah.
Which is I thought would do better than it's done, because there's lots of people doing vintage Americana bands.
Right.
Like with the dress and everything, but there was no one doing Latin music like that. Well, maybe I see why, because there's not much of a call for it. But I do get things every once in a while for people who want that. I currently work and lead a band at No Vacancy with a partner of mine, Bill Ungerman, and there we do like 60s rock and soul and some 70s stuff. And we back up a tightrope walker and a fire dancer and burlesque dancers there. So
that's kind of a smorgasbord of a gig, because there are some just band numbers, and then there's like a very vaudeville sort of tightrope guy who juggles and whatever. That's a really fun gig. And
then with him and James Aker, I lead a band called the New Recessionaires, and we do a vintage music like 20s to the 40s. And we're actually recording a double album right now, so we're almost finished mixing it. So
cool.
That's pretty hip. And I mean, those are the acts besides just my quartet, which is sort of, the Big Willie's Burlesque without the dancers.
Right.
Those are the main acts I'm working with these days.
Yeah. Did you? How did you definitely have an onstage persona,
right?
Especially with the burlesque thing,
right?
Did you always have that in any band you're in? Like, do you
well, I think I started. I did this in the '90s. I was in a seminal ska band called Jump with Joey, with my partner Joe Altruda, and there we used to have a pretty wicked banter between the two of us because it was an instrumental band. It was like kind of we did like old Scatolite style ska, like roots ska, 60s style ska, and so there were no lead vocals, so we would kind of like talk a lot in between, and we really actually talk a lot of shit, and and I think there is when I started kind of developing the persona. But then when I started doing the burlesque thing at the 40 Deuce, that's when I really developed it.
Yeah.
It just kind of came naturally, I guess.
Yeah. And it really contributes to the show.
Oh, completely. I mean, this is the thing that, again, like most musicians don't get. It's like, it doesn't matter that I wrote these arrangements, I'm playing my ass off, I'm directing the band, and I work with the dancers, working out these routines, all this stuff. All I ever hear after the show is, "Oh, I love your faces. Oh, I love the face. Oh, you're the guy with the faces. Oh, I love your faces." It's like, so there you go. There you have it.
That's what keeps them happy.
Exactly. It's keeping me busy, keeping me employed.
Yeah. And that was, I guess I just sort of answered my own question, but I was thinking yesterday about how long you've been in this town and how long you've stayed busy, and this is a town that worships youth. This is a town with a short attention span, and if you're over 30, like, it can be hard to get attention for anything.
Yeah, I know, people like that.
Yeah, so how have you stayed busy? How have you stayed relevant?
Keep young girls taking their clothes off.
That's
they don't have to be that young. They could be mid-30s.
That's
that's honestly is what it is.
It's a beautifully simple strategy.
Because pretty much all my regular gigs now are burlesque gigs. I don't know. I think a lot of when it has been a concern of mine because I'm 53 and I'm like, am I still going to be working in Hollywood clubs when I'm 60? Like, I don't know if I can see that or not. You know? But when I talk to other people about it, they're like, why not? You still you still have a youthful vigor or whatever, the comment is.
Yeah, if you got the energy and people still dig it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of like the elder, that cool old guy. Oh, that cool old guy up there on the drums, I mean, well, I'm amazed because Vacancy, the club on Hollywood Boulevard, is right in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard, sequin mini dress,
Right.
And I am amazed at how much love I get, how much, like, after the show, how many, young people come up, people in their 20s and stuff, like, floored by what I do and the show and stuff, so it's hard, it gives you faith in humanity. I guess,
especially in Hollywood.
Yes, you're in Hollywood here, and it's like, wow, these people are actually paying attention and getting it and digging it. And, so that's good.
Yeah. So there's,
but it's hard because I think I've always been a little bit chameleon, but you gotta kind of keep with the times, somewhat. I'm not saying you need to be like a cover band to be playing Adele and like the latest covers and stuff, but you kind of got to know what tunes are current out there, and if there's a way you can maybe do a few of them in your own, translate it, in your own way.
Right.
Like I do like that song Smells Like Teen Spirit, but I do it as a swing. And people really dig it. Not that it's that current, but it's more current than some.
Yeah, and again, it's something people recognize.
Exactly, it's recognizable. Yeah.
So in the past, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, there's been a resurgence in vintage music and acoustic music in kind of the whole vintage aesthetic.
Okay, there has been?
I think so.
Okay.
You've been in LA doing it for for the whole time, but I think the rest of us sort of came around to it. What do you attribute that to? What do you attribute the continued popularity of that music to?
I don't know. I'd have to say maybe partly because the current music that's coming out is such shit. I mean, I really bemoan the loss of good songwriting. Mm-hmm. Like, songwriting's just not like what it used to be. Like, there aren't intros and endings or bridges or, Yeah. I mean, a good pop song's a good pop song, no matter, who it is, or a rock song, whatever. But it just seems like, listen to some Amy Winehouse tune and then the track just ends and the beat just stops. It's like, really?
Right.
You couldn't, like, come up with something there? Or, I don't know. I just don't hear too much modern music that I really care for, and there might be a lot of other people in the same boat, and then they kind of go back and find other things. Like, it's funny, like the whole ska thing, the whole two-tone, the whole rude boy, whatever thing. It's like every year there's young geeky people who get into it and stuff, and the music's cool, but it's like, how long can this keep regenerating itself? But it keeps to always do it. There's a new fresh crop of skinheads out there or something. But I don't know. Well, I think partly because of all art's somewhat intertwined, particularly fashion, music and fashion are intertwined, and I think with these shows like Boardwalk Empire and the Great Gatsby movie and the whole kind of like retro 20s sort of thing, it's made it popular in culture. And like, I know when I see, particularly with the Edison, and I see all the girls coming with the vintage dresses and the pearl, and just so I think that has, fashion has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is because I actually play music from the 20s and 30s, and a lot of times when people hire you for a party, they're like, oh, it's a Great Gatsby themed party or something. Well, they just want the look.
Right.
They don't want the music.
Right. Or they
and then they go, oh yeah, Frank Sinatra, yeah. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, 20s, Frank Sinatra, got it, yeah.
What is your approach to your gear? Because you play all these different gigs. A lot of them are vintage,
right?
What's sitting in your?
Well, I've never been. It's funny because I've never been that much of a purist. I've always been someone who's kind of crossed a lot of different genres and done a lot of different things. So when it comes to gear, again, I've never been that much of a purist. I've always been someone who played Slingerland drums. I guess just because I just always liked them. I have 3 Slingerland kits right now. My main kit is like it's a Marine Pearl Slingerland kit with like a 20-inch kick and a 12 and a 14 floor tom, 12 wrap, 14. But it's a reproduction. It's made in '95. It's not like a vintage kit. Yeah. But everyone thinks it's vintage.
Right.
And I'm like, no, it's a reproduction. But it sounds great.
Yeah.
That's kind of my main kit that I use most of the time for most of my gigs. Actually, on the Big Willie's Burlesque, I use a vintage, like, red sort of psychedelic swirl Slingerland kit from like '68, and that has the same size, except it has a 16-inch floor tom. So that's my burlesque kit because that's a bigger floor tom, and it has my Big Willie's Burlesque drum head. It's like I just don't like taking bass drum heads off. So I'm like, okay, when I do the burlesque show, I use this kit.
Yeah.
I have a PDP, a Pacific Drum kit that I got 10 years ago or something. I didn't want to spend the money on a DW. And Stan at Pro Drum said, hey, it's the same drums, just has different hardware. And that's what if I need like a really louder rock kit, or if I'm doing a louder Latin gig, or if it's something like I'm playing outside and I need to bring the big guns, I'll bring that out. But the main thing that I guess the approach that I do differently is I have a very weird bell tree setup, and it's kind of like a hybrid on timbali setup. I use a mambo bell, a cha-cha bell, and the jam block, and then also one agogo, like a Brazilian thing, and I put them like all in a cross pattern, with the cha-cha facing me, the mambo to the right, the jam block in front, and the agogo to the left. And the reason I got that for the burlesque theme because I can do really fast what I call like Barney Rubble, like kind of like fills.
Yeah.
So that would be, I guess, one big approach is that I always have the bells, and on the vintage 20s American roots music gig, I use it all the time in all kinds of fills and stuff. And then if I'm playing Cuban music, then I use it, to play, the bell part, the bell patterns. So that'd be, I guess, one different approach. But like I said, I've never really been. I've always kind of stuck by the statement that it's not the drum, it's the drummer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it seemed, from what I've heard, it seems like you just need something that works. You don't get too precious about the drums you play or when they were made or by whom. Like if they sound good and they look good, then... Yeah, I had this, I like the Ludwig supersonic snare, like in the 70s. I got 2 of them. But then I got this Yamaha reproduction of it. I don't know what it's called, but it's like basically they knocked off the supersonic, and I use it all the time. I really like it. Yeah.
But I got an old Gretsch 50s snare when I'm doing like I have like a 28-inch bass drum and a Gretsch, like from the 40s or something, snare drum. And I got temple blocks and the splash cymbals and China cymbal and all that. If I really want to go vintage with the new recessionaires, I can.
Right.
I just find it without a rack tom. It's like if you're only going to do 20s music or something, that's fine. But then when we go into the 40s and they want me to do like a sing thing, I kind of really miss the rack tom.
Yeah.
Because it's harder to do lots of soloing with just a floor tom and a snare.
Right.
For me.
Right.
At least.
What is next for you? What do you have your eye on after leading so many bands and being here for so many years? Like you gotta have your next move in the back of your mind.
Yeah, well, I got this new album called Schmooze Jazz, music to make deals by, and it's mastered. So I just have to do the artwork.
And is that with your quartet?
Yeah, it's with my quartet, and it's a bunch of recordings over many years, and it's all funky jazz.
Yeah.
So sort of acid jazz revival.
Music to make deals by.
Yeah. And so I want to get that out and see what I can do with that. It's all instrumental, like I said, funky jazz music. So I don't have a lot of high hopes, but, maybe get some jazz radio airplay and maybe get a few things. For the new Recessionaires, we got, like I said, a double album coming out, so I'm hoping to get some licensing and maybe get some more high-profile gigs, Levitt Pavilion, sort of things like that with that. Other than that, I don't know. I wrote a theme song for Bernie Sanders. I got to get it to him.
Cool.
We'll see if maybe I can launch his career with my song. I don't at the moment. I'm at a place in my career where I feel like I've done a lot of stuff. So I don't really. And I feel I've been successful at a lot of things too. So I don't feel that. Motivated to do too much.
Right.
As it is, I still work 3-4 nights a week, and when I do casuals, when I do private events and stuff, it's a lot of work. And I'm probably going to be moving to Portland.
Really?
Yeah, we bought a house. My wife and I bought a house up there, so that would probably be what my next move would be. And then if I move up there, I'm just not really sure, I'll probably be playing music, but I don't,
Well, that reminds me of something we were talking about before we started recording, which was that you were saying how the live music market can actually be better in smaller cities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think everybody, particularly in LA and in New York, they're in LA or New York, to make it's all about me, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's all about me. It's about their career. It's about their thing. And so everybody is kind of thinking about themselves more than, there aren't that many people who are here. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I work at a hotel. I'm just floating around. And
in those big towns, I think the objective of most people is to record and tour. Right. And the idea of just like a local live music scene is not a priority for those big towns.
Particularly when, it's like as many players do, it's like you're really taken for granted in your hometown, and like you do great in San Francisco, or we do great everywhere else, but anytime we play in LA or New York, it's like nobody, it's
right,
and I take that part to be because, like, I don't know, people take you for granted, and it's like, oh yeah, I saw them once like 5 years ago, or so, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't need to see them, or
right.
I don't know. I think people are kind of jaded in the bigger cities. It's like they have so much to do and so much to go to, and so much that's offered to them that it's
Yeah, I had a friend describe it once as she's a great singer, and she said if you play in other cities around the country, the audience is like they sit on the edge of their seat and they give you all their attention and they say entertain me.
Yeah.
But if you're in LA, people sit back and cross their arms and say impress me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
And I've found that to be true. But
these days, it's all about people on their phone. It's like you can't even get, you know what I mean? Like you can get them off the phone.
Right.
But in smaller markets, mid-sized, smaller cities, I think people are less jaded and more genuine, and they're kind of really just kind of more into going out and having a good time. So they're kind of more. I mean, I'm not trying to say people are false in LA. I think they just don't have, the sign. Life's a bit faster. They don't have the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of demand on everybody's time and attention.
Yeah,
and it kind of creates a sense that they need to be paying attention to the next thing because they're missing out on something.
Right.
And sometimes that's true, and I've felt it myself. I've been, I'm guilty of it myself.
Right, but but it's always kind of been that way. It's just better in the smaller markets.
Yeah.
I think people have more time and more time to relax and enjoy themselves.
Yeah. Is there any type of music that you really love that you haven't gotten to fully explore yet in a band?
Yeah, Brazilian music.
So that might be the next thing.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. I really like this composer Marcos Valle, and he's still doing it, and he's older, and he actually wrote Summer Samba back in the late Bossa Nova period in the 60s, and he's had a really amazing career, and I love his songwriting. His songwriting is really good, so I'd like to meet him. I'd like to go to. I've never been to Brazil, so I'd like to go to Brazil, meet him, hang out, pick his brain, and whatever. Learn more about the Escola do Samba and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I think I played Bossa Nova pretty well, but there's so much other. I don't really know much about the samba, and then of course, it's again like in the Afro-Cuban music. It's about how you interpret it onto the drum set.
Right, it's a whole different swing. There's a whole different swing to it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, whether it's in LA or Portland or Brazilian or burlesque or whatever, I'm sure you're gonna continue to put smiles on people's faces.
I hope so.
Thanks for talking with us.
All right, man.
I told you, Big Willie pulls no punches, spares no feelings. No one is safe. But that interview was a blast. It was great to get the perspective of someone who's been in LA for that long and been involved in that many projects over the years. And if you were thinking about naming your band Tupelo Sex Chain, Big Willie's here to tell you that name's taken. Check out his website at williemcneillmusic.com. There's a link to it in the show notes for this episode. You can see what else Willie has done and is doing. He's been so busy for so long, I feel like we just scratched the surface in the time we had. There's really a ton of content on his website. He has audio and video of the 8 groups he currently leads, and it's really a feast for the eyes and the ears alike. Be sure to follow Working Drummer Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you dig the podcast, please go to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. That's really helpful for us. You can also now follow the Merge Network on social media to stay up to date on all 3 podcasts that are part of Merge. That's the Working Drummer Podcast, the Drummer's Resource Podcast with Nick Ruffini, and the Daniel Glass Podcast. Thanks as always for listening, and we'll see you back here next week.